Welcome to Manager Tools. Managing During a Pandemic, the COVID-19 Cast. Part 1. This cast answers these questions. How should I manage my team during the international pandemic? What can I do to communicate enough during a crisis? Are there special rules about working from home? Well, if you want answers to these questions and more, keep listening. Here we go. Well, I'd say by this time, if folks have been listening to our daily cast, they know we're very aware of the pandemic that's going on and major changes in the business and the economy and health and safety and their teams. And, people are wondering, asking us, what do I do during this international pandemic? How can I make a difference?
Yeah, I think you're right. Certainly, we've gotten a lot of questions, a lot of emails. People have been texting me and calling me. But in addition, I suspect there'll be many people who'll be listening to us for the very first time because they searched for guidance about the pandemic and managing. And maybe they're not even podcast people. So for those of you who are first-time listeners, welcome. We're doing something very different than we normally do. If you don't know, we have been producing weekly management guidance podcast for the last nearly 15 years now, and are downloaded millions of times a month all over the world. And we typically release Manager Tools casts on Monday of the week. And we tend to, if it's a long cast, we do it in two parts, and you'll get part one on Monday and part two the next Monday. But COVID-19 changes all that. And if you don't know, for the previous week, we've been every single day putting out a cast that are historical casts. In fact, many of them, I think, from our Hall of Fame, that address some of these issues about how to do one-on-ones, how to do phone one-on-ones, how to affect your costs with a topic called Race Don't Chase, and also about the potential for layoffs and what you might be doing to address that. In this particular case, we're addressing the manager who is suddenly faced with, I used to be co-located with my team, and now I'm not. Everybody's working from home, or almost everybody is working from home. There are special cases to be had everywhere. And you realize that things are different than they were a month ago, and perhaps you need some additional managerial behaviors to maintain the high level productivity you've already got, or just address what you're sensing is a lack of communication, more distance. And when you add that together with the fear of the pandemic, perhaps some different management behaviors are in order, and we would say you're right. And so we want to cover things you can start doing today, literally, including one-on-ones, that will help you be more effective. Now, that said, one of our mottos here at Manager Tools, for those of you who don't know us, is that we deliver timeless, not timely guidance. We think one of the reasons we have so many hundreds of millions of downloads over the years is because when people listen to some of our casts that are current, they realize, if in fact they take to our guidance, that the entire catalog of 1,000 shows essentially are stuff you can use right now. We don't cover current affairs. We don't try to address social trends or what's cool. Look, how could we talk about what's cool? We're talking about management, which may be the most uncool thing in the world.
Yeah, and I'm definitely uncool. So
yeah, I'm seriously uncool. But COVID-19, we think, calls for special measures. It certainly has an effect. It has had an effect on our business. We're in the process of considering canceling multiple public conferences. We certainly have clients deferring conferences. This doesn't have an effect overall on the health of our business, but we're adjusting and responding and communicating like crazy. And so we thought we'd distill our guidance that I've been giving out individually to people over the last several days and put it in a podcast so that more people can benefit. And the fact is, this may be a crisis of significant proportions named COVID-19, but I think it's safe to say that there could be another economic crisis or another health crisis or another crisis of violence, for instance, in the world that will have significant impacts on managerial life, professional life, personal lives as well. And so we can safely assume that within those broad parameters, this will happen again. And so as I was writing this guidance, I realized this guidance is going to become timeless as well. But we're releasing it now and tomorrow so that it can be timely for you as you face a significant increase in your responsibilities. And that happens to be coupled with a significant increase in the fear and uncertainty and doubt that are in many of your colleagues' minds. Now, we'll just share our guidance generally that we would encourage you to not worry about what's going to happen in the world. Rather, think about what you're going to do. That's not to say that there's not a case for worry, but there's a choice we all make about whether we're going to worry or whether we're going to think and act. And as I've said many, many times on the air over the last 15 years, worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. The real question is, okay, based on what you think the situation is, what are you going to do? And then, because you're a manager, how are you going to communicate about that? And as we often recommend, communicate aggressively, certainly in times of crisis. Okay, so we've got 5 parts to this cast. I want to start by talking about working remotely and about fear that people are feeling and the importance of communication. And the goal here ought to be in the near term to strengthen your trust between you and your team. Unfortunately, fear and working remotely work against that. So if you want trust, you've got to go through communication, but fear and distance both kill communication unless you work aggressively around it. So that means point 2 is we want you to start one-on-ones right now, today, or at the very latest tomorrow. We also are going to recommend you start morning video stand-ups, group video chats with all of your directs, those who are remote, and those who are in the office, if that's the case for you. We also are going to recommend you communicate aggressively. Many managers don't understand the difference between passively reading their email and communicating aggressively. We'll give you some examples. And then lastly, we've gotten a lot of questions about legalities and so on. As a general rule, we stay away from those because we're not lawyers. But there are some general rules of thumb that would apply to most first world countries, some rules and some laws of note that are worth remembering as a manager and that should hopefully make you feel more comfortable when you start getting questions that you're inevitably going to get. Keep in mind, our guidance will be biased, if you'll pardon the expression, based on the fact that it's easy for us to learn about U.S. laws and rules. It may be harder for us to predict what things will be like in Spain or Egypt or Japan or New Zealand or Australia or India or wherever else. But it should give you some guidance that will help you navigate the waters in terms of trying to communicate clearly with your staff about what's happening to them, to the economy, and to your organization.
Okay, so let's talk about what this idea of working remotely and fear and how this kind of bad cocktail that a lot of people are stepping into, and what the role of communication and trust is in addressing those two things.
I don't know. As busy as we've been lately, I'm not sure there's any such thing as a bad cocktail. Depending, I suppose at 8 o'clock in the morning, it might be a bad cocktail, but yeah, fear and yeah. So look, guys, your directs right now, many of them, maybe not all, but many, certainly a majority, are fearful for their own health and their families. If they have elderly parents, they're particularly fearful. And at the same time, they're drawn to go to their elderly parents. They're also being told, no, you probably shouldn't do that. And by the way, if they have elderly parents, They're at greater risk. And so they're feeling more fear. And what do they want? They want to connect with people. Not that you're responsible for your direct's elderly parents, but you are responsible for your direct's productivity and the concerns about their young children and their extended family and their friends and their colleagues and their more elderly family members are germane to your work. At the same time, many of your directs are knowledgeable. Some are not. My sense of what I've seen in terms of people's level of knowledge of what's actually happening is, to be honest, fairly poor in the last couple of weeks. We're recording this literally on Sunday, March 15th, so that I could gather as much data as we possibly could. Typically, we don't do that. We've recorded well before a podcast comes out. But I'm surprised at the rumors that people will traffic and the pictures they'll believe and the behavior in stores. Right now in Britain and in the US, I've heard of many stories. I'm certain this is true everywhere, but I'm reporting what I know based on firsthand knowledge, either through me or my spouse, or news that I've received from a curated, trusted news source. Okay, which I don't
Twitter,
think.
right? Twitter.
Yeah, I don't think Twitter is, guys. And now there's a difference between reading a New York Times story that you get through Twitter and somebody posting an opinion on Twitter. But I'm surprised at people buying hundreds of rolls of toilet paper. You can complain about the store not having enough, or you could look to your neighbor and say, why don't you behave a little bit more responsibly? And of course, the answer to this is the pricing mechanism, but nobody wants to talk about that. So look, the more fear your directs feel, the less effective they're going to be at work. We managers have a special responsibility. You're not an individual contributor as a manager, okay? Yes, you have individual contributor responsibilities, but you are both doing individual contributor work and managerial work. And in your role as a manager, you are the company to your direct reports. That's what role power is. That's why your directs can't tell you something in confidence, because there is no confidence, because when they speak to you, you represent the entire leadership of the organization. In our case, though, as managers, we have responsibility as people, obviously as ethical beings. But in addition, we represent our organization. And part of that responsibility is to work to build trust, and in some ways, rebuild trust between the organization and your people, so your people can be more effective. And the reason this is so important, the reason I talk about trust, and it happens to work right into the basic principles that Manager Tools is founded upon. But the reason we're talking about trust is because trust is what we know and what we've measured for years. And because any sociologist will tell you, if you want to drive out fear, the two things that will do it are activity and high levels of trust. If there are reasons to be fearful, and we all have those every day, just getting in your car and going to work, but there are also systems around you to trust, you're not caused to inaction and immobilization because of fear.
Right. And that's your responsibility as a manager, right? That's what we're trying to prevent.
Yeah, exactly. Trust, we're trying to drive trust higher to reduce fear to the point where we can get high levels of effectiveness. And right now, organizations are very concerned about high levels of effectiveness because they're in a crisis. The statistic that I saw was that United Airlines, not saying every industry is affected the way airlines are, but United Airlines bookings are off 70%. At some point, what that's going to mean we're recording this in March, in August or in July or whenever those bookings were, there will be a 70% drop in revenue for United Airlines. That's tens of thousands of people's jobs. And it's very serious. And so when the going gets tough, the tough get going and figure out solutions about what we can do to protect our relationship with our customers and to protect people's jobs. And look, guys, it doesn't matter what your personality is when it comes to management. We've shared that data 1,000 times before. We have data which shows it doesn't matter if you're outgoing or you're reserved, doesn't matter if you're technical or not. It doesn't matter if you're friendly or taciturn. It doesn't matter if you're a people person. It doesn't matter if you like talking to other people. It doesn't matter how you see management, whether it's giving orders and being dictatorial or being collaborative. How many resumes have you seen that says collaborative, trust building, team building, visionary leader?
I hire those people immediately
all the time. I
so
believe
good.
everything they say. They're so good because they say they are. It doesn't matter. Trust is and has been for the past 50 years the most directly correlated measure to high results and retention. And if you don't know, if you've not been listening to us for a while, results and retention are the two most important things managers are responsible for worldwide. You have to achieve your job goals, results, and you have to do so in a way that's sustainable, that keeps your people. Okay. Now look, here's the problem with what we're going through right now. It doesn't matter how much trust that exists between you and your directs right now relative to the inevitable degradation of trust that's going to happen to many of us when directs start working remotely. For most of us, the truth is right now, more than ever, we need as much trust as we can get with our directs. And when you think about it, you realize if you're the CEO of your company, you are assuming that that's what people have been doing, that managers have been building close, trusting relationships with their team. If you haven't done one-on-ones before and suddenly the workload increases, the fear goes up, the distance goes up, the trust goes down because people are worried about whether or not they're going to lose their jobs in the next 2 years, and that creates fear, which erodes trust. If you haven't already invested in this, you're at a significant disadvantage. Your productivity of your team is going to take a hit. Yes, some of your team will step up and say, this is the time when good people step up, and they will, and they'll step up even when they don't trust you because that's just who they are. But there'll be plenty of other people who don't, and they'll spend 30 or 40% of their time warming up their network so that they will be able to get a job as soon as possible after everything shakes out. Okay, so your organization expects you to have already built trust. This is what you need. How do you do that? Well, none of the stuff that we've shared so far is our opinion. This is all management theory 101. It's been known for a long time, but I'll just go a step further and say there's even more we know about trust. Whether you like communicating or not, guys, sociologists tell us that the way you build trust is through communication. This is trust building 101, more communication.
Assuming that you're trustworthy, right?
Well, yeah, if you're not trustworthy, folks, you can stop listening because we not only don't want to help you, but we probably can't help you anyway. So save yourself some time. When communication increases between two people, trust increases. There are limits, but they are the limits on trust are far beyond what most of us assume or what most people get measured at. Others measure our communication with them. So if I'm talking to Mike measures his communication with me based on two factors: quantity, how often I do it, using all sorts of vehicles, media, and quality. And quality by human beings in measuring communication is whether or not the communication is valid, relevant, important to the other person. We've all met the person who talks a lot about themselves. As the saying goes about high eyes, CEOs and airline pilots. Hey, enough about me. What do you think about me? That can be annoying and trust destroying pretty quickly. So all this basic logic of science tells us that the most effective way to increase trust at a time like now when you most need it is to talk more frequently to our directs about things that are important to them. Okay? It's as simple as that. Now, there are 1,000 different ways. As we say every time we do a conference, public or private, there are 1,000 different ways to do that. And MT03s, Manager Tools 101s, are only one way to do it.
But they work. We can demonstrate that. We have proof of that, right?
We have proof of that, historical proof in large numbers and so on, whereas most people don't have that. And that's why we exist in part to teach effective one-on-ones. Okay, so that's how you do it. But now we've got an additional challenge. Remote working, the distance, erodes communication. Folks, if you've never heard of it before, we've mentioned it a few times over the last 15 years, but the Allen curve, which was discovered in the 1970s at MIT and has since been validated more recently in the era of text messages and cell phones and Slack, shows that frequency of communication declines based on distance in a roughly inverse logarithmic curve, okay, with marginally zero communications between boss and subordinate, actually between any two professional colleagues, at roughly 50 meters, 160 feet.
I thought that 50 M was 50 miles. It's meters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just meters. I mean, if you're 30 feet from your direct, but she is one floor above you, and that's the 30 feet, you might as well be in another zip code.
True.
Again, the curve goes to zero very closely at 50 meters. If you're sitting 100 yards away from your boss, you might as well be on a phone call with him. Now look, guys, this gets even better, okay? I know that some of you are not communicators. Fine, no problem, okay? But right now, you're being paid to be a communicator. If you want to assert your personal privilege over what your work responsibilities are, I'll just tell you, you wouldn't want to work for me because I would encourage you to seek your personal privileges somewhere else, okay? You know, in the era of always-on technical communications, all the channels we have availability, interestingly, you would think, okay, but there's more ways I can talk to people, so therefore somehow the distance doesn't matter. The data show that's not the case, guys. Allen's work showed when he updated it, even in modern times, increasing distance doesn't cause us to use different media. Distance causes a decay in frequency of communication in all forms of the media, and it's even worse than that. Allen shows, the data Allen has gathered shows, we don't segregate our friends and colleagues into different media buckets. The more often we have face-to-face conversations, the more often we text or phone or email those people. So if I talk to you a lot face-to-face, I'm going to be doing texting and phoning and emailing with you more. If I don't talk to you a lot face-to-face, I tend to do that less. And look, guys, directs who are at home, in our experience, this is before COVID-19, directs who are at home are twice as hard to manage for managers who naturally prefer frequent communication. Remote managing is harder. It is.
Yeah, that was, when you first said that number to me, I was a little surprised because I didn't hear the second part, because when you said it's twice as hard, it's like, dude, it's way more harder than that for me.
Well, okay, yeah, that's because the other part of the data is, in our estimation, based on what I've seen and the kind of questions we get and the way people deal with this, it's twice as hard for people to manage people distantly if you naturally are a communicator. But if you're not naturally a communicator, and Mike is throwing himself under the bus, but I can attest the fact, guys, he's not a natural communicator. And by the way, he's a great manager because he goes against type. It's 5 times as hard to manage people at a distance.
Yeah, just put an ice pick in my temple.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not naturally inclined to communicate, and by the way, it's okay to be that way. Mr. Rogers was right. Who you are is okay. But if you're in a role that plays against your type, you can't claim, well, that's not what I wanted or liked to do.
You don't get a pass from the organization.
Yeah, you don't get paid to do what you like. You get paid to you get paid to engage in behaviors that deliver effective results for the organization. And by the way, there's no shame in saying, you know what, this isn't for me. I am naturally not this type of person, and I've tried doing behaviors. I don't want you to change your type of person. I just want you to engage in some high stress activities for yourself. Sorry, because I'm putting results over your stress. No offense. And if you're not willing to do that, we totally respect that. And find a different job, one that plays more to your type. In fact, you might be happier, and the happiness you get may help you want to do it even more. Look, so for those of you who are longtime listeners, if you're a high D or a high C or both, high D, high C, in the DISC model, and your team is now being asked to work remotely, you've got a really big behavioral challenge in front of you. This is especially true if you're not doing one-on-ones now, because you've been giving yourself an excuse.
And those of you who are doing it, congratulations. You just made your job a lot easier now because you've prepared for months or years.
Yeah, it's, guys, to some degree, it's like the ant and the grasshopper. Both of them knew winter were coming. Okay? They did. And the ant worked and the grasshopper didn't. Well, it's winter now. Luckily, for those of you who are grasshoppers, you can respond immediately, and you will get immediate benefits that far outstrip the amount of half hours you're going to spend in your one-on-ones. Okay. Even if we haven't convinced you that distance alone is going to crush your communications and trust, consider that most data on high-performing professionals shows that the greater the performance, the greater their interaction with other people. Top performers communicate with roughly 4 times as many people as lower performers. Okay? I don't cite this as data, but my conclusion from that, I'm not suggesting that this is data or science any more than a lot of the beliefs in my head are not data or science, but I've listened to the data and science. My wife will tell you, it's one of the very few things I'm good at in the world is knowing everything there is to know about management. And I've concluded that the ability, maybe not the willingness, the ability to communicate with other people is enormously important in terms of effectiveness. And if you listen to some of our old casts, you'll hear us talk about that over and over again. And it goes further, guys. Ideas, creation of new ideas, which, by the way, right now are at a premium in your company, also share a correlation with interactions. Creativity research shows that people who have more ideas have interacted with more people. Okay. Creativity is called for today. That's going to take persuasion to get people to follow your ideas, to implement your ideas. Persuasion requires trust. Trust requires communication. Communication requires us actually listening and talking. As we like to say here at Manager Tools, communication is what the listener does. That's why one-on-ones, as we'll talk about in a minute here, allow the direct to go first, not manager going first.
Yeah. So let's talk about one-on-ones. Now, what we're going to recommend today is a little bit different than we normally recommend in terms of start doing one-on-ones now. Like literally, if you listen to this, start tomorrow.
Yeah, that's and there have been people complaining to us for years. I really need to start one-on-ones right now. I said, okay, go ahead and try, but your people are going to push back if you haven't been doing them for a while. But we're going to give you a fantastic opportunity to implement one-on-ones right now. And look, if you're doing one-on-ones right now, by all means, continue them. But don't assume that one-on-ones that are a panacea. If you've gotten used to your team being close to you and doing face-to-face one-on-ones, phone one-on-ones are not as good as face-to-face. And video one-on-ones are not as good. They're better than phone, but they're not as good as face-to-face. That said, you can't do face-to-face. The question becomes, What should you do? And the answer is certainly not stop doing one-on-ones. It's just do as much as you possibly can, which would be video.
Yeah, and it's not in the show notes. And you mentioned people doing one-on-ones already and what they should or should continue doing. Folks, don't make the mistake that somebody I know, somebody close to me, did, which is in a crisis, decide that they needed more time to do the work involved in solving the crisis. And where they got that time was stopping one-on-ones. That's not...
Wait. I'm sorry. Can I just do a little MT lore here? If you're new to the show, I apologize for this, because Mike is making a joke, but you don't know the story.
I'm guessing you're going to shortly.
You are referring to yourself in the third person, are you not?
Yes, right, I am. Yeah, in the royal we kind of way.
Yes, exactly. For those of you who don't know, folks, Mike and I had careers before we started doing manager tools out of the goodness of our hearts. And Mike was fairly senior executive at MCI. And then WorldCom, when bankruptcy was declared, he had an outstanding team of people. Who he's still in contact with all of them. They're just fantastic people.
They were the best.
They were the best. Kathy and Susie, and
Mark and
Greg, and Mike, and just world-class people. Anyway, Mike decided he was just so swamped with budget issues around the bankruptcy that he would go to bi-weekly, fortnightly, every other week one-on-ones to save himself some time. So, Mike, share that story.
Yeah. So I had more work to do, so I did it. And I won't share the whole thing because it could take a half an hour, but it was a disaster. It was an absolutely unmitigated disaster. Don't do it, folks. I saved myself, 3 or 4 hours a week in one-on-one. At the expense of, I can't even tell you. 10, 20, who knows? It was awful.
Yeah. Not good.
Yeah, and that's why we can do these podcasts, folks, because just about everything we talk about on these podcasts, I've done the opposite and lived with the consequences.
Well, to be fair, so have I. That's the whole point of the cast. We tell people all the time. People say to us, gosh, you're clearly a great manager. You know a lot. I said, yeah, I know a lot because I did it the wrong way for years, and nobody was around to tell us this stuff.
Yeah.
They certainly weren't around to tell us for free. So anyway, our guidance in a nutshell. And this part of the cast. If you're not doing one-on-ones, start them today with all of your directs. Okay. Now, we have 2 phases to this guidance. Okay. And full disclosure, we have 100 podcasts. No, probably not 100, maybe 50 podcasts out of our catalog, which you can get to iTunes and Google. As well as come to our website if you want, and you can get them in our app for free. We have voluminous guidance about one-on-ones and all of the issues you're going to face and pushback and custom situations you might find yourself in. We have an entire podcast feed just for one-on-ones. Okay. So phase 1 in this guidance today, though, is what one-on-ones are, in case you don't know. So for those of you longtime listeners, you may want to refresh, but you may want to skip this. And phase 2 is how to roll them out today. I think of this, I'll always think of this cast as the one-on-one force majeure podcast that normally we would recommend waiting, but, to have some time to implement the tool. But under the circumstances of COVID-19 and future similar international, worldwide crises, you take aggressive action. Okay, so let's start with phase 1. What is a manager tools one-on-one? What do I mean? What do we mean when we say do a one-on-one? And the reason we make that distinction is because one-on-ones are not like E equals MC squared. It's not that when you say that, everybody knows exactly what it is. You're going to hear a lot of people talking about one-on-ones, and probably more frequently lately because of the telecommuting that so many people are doing. And they mean different stuff. Some people, for some managers, a one-on-one is monthly, and it's a project update or it's a formal briefing by the direct. For others, it's a bi-weekly meeting with a very specific manager-driven agenda. Those things are not what we mean when we say one-on-ones. Okay. We've spent the last 25 years, I certainly have, gathering data about many managerial behaviors, but especially about one-on-ones. And we have ample data, and we've released a cast about one-on-ones and data, that a lot of what other managers do related to one-on-ones are not effective, even though they then can say, I do one-on-ones. In fact, in many cases, what directs of managers who do one-on-ones not our way would say is my boss is just checking a box. If your directs are feeling like your boss, that you are just checking a box, then you're not achieving what a one-on-one is meant to achieve. Now, there's always the 1% person who works for you, who's been burned by the previous 5 bosses, and you'll never get him or her to ever trust you. Okay. Yeah, that happens. It's pretty darn rare, though. I wouldn't worry about it. And I certainly wouldn't build my entire managerial approach around that one guy's completely burned career trust quotient.
Yeah. And if you have 5 of them, 5 of those people, you might want to look elsewhere. May not be them.
I would argue that nobody has 5 of those people. They don't. You just think that they're pushing back a little bit. And so you're not willing to go through with one-on-ones, when in fact, if you'd stick with it for 3 months, what you'll discover is those 5 who are acting as if they don't want to do it have just been taught by previous bosses that if they push back for 60 days on any new managerial initiative, you'll back down. And and you'll hear them say, it's flavor of the month. Well, buddy, I mean, if somebody said to me, how do I know this isn't flavor of the month? The first thing I would say to them is, well, apparently you don't know me. And the second thing is, I'll make you a deal. You can call it flavor of the month, and you keep doing it. And every week in this meeting, you'll have to mention that it's flavor of the month, because you must believe it if you're willing to say it in public. But a year from now, after you've said it 50 times in 50 weeks, you're going to have to give a public apology to everybody about saying it's flavor of the month.
Nice.
Yeah. I did that once. And, everybody else liked it, but that one guy. But to tell you the truth, since Dark Mark still exists, apparently, according to our fans, I didn't care. And he wasn't my top performer. Okay.
Shocker. Performer doesn't want to communicate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you an example of some data. We mentioned data. One of the biggest standout pieces of data we ever had is never. And by the way, guys, really, seriously, never do monthly one-on-ones. Directs hate them. Not that the world revolves around what directs like and don't like. Every large study we ever did, when we compared periodicity, frequency of one-on-ones, compared twice a week to weekly, weekly to every other week, weekly to every other week to monthly, monthly to twice a week. We've done it all. Every large study we ever did, when monthly was included, every single time the control group of managers who did nothing different scored better in results and retention. And by the way, their results and retention remain unchanged than the monthly one-on-one group did. Meaning every single time we've ever tested a manager sitting down and talking to his or her directs monthly, results and retention scores went down.
All right. And folks, don't misunderstand us. We're not saying that you can't have a monthly meeting with your direct, say an operational review of somebody's group. But just don't confuse that with the one-on-one. Different objective.
Yeah. Different objective. Process, Good point. Yeah. Okay. So let's run through the non-negotiables if you want to ensure greater results from retention, particularly in light of the special problems we're facing right now in the world in March of 2020. So the first thing is, it's got to be a scheduled meeting. Okay. You can't just meet with your people whenever you want off the cuff, off the top of your head. It doesn't work. We used to teach when we taught, this is 20 years ago when I taught one-on-ones, I would teach the most important thing is weekly. And then I would say, and you should schedule it. And then we discovered, and people assume that frequency is most important because managers' big concern, of course, is their time. And frequency is important, but only secondarily to promising your directs you're going to do them. And it's always hard for me to say this data, so I want you guys to listen carefully for this. Managers who schedule one-on-ones for happening every other week, bi-weekly, stupid word, so I like to say fortnightly. Managers who schedule one-on-ones for every other week in large studies get better results and retention improvements than managers who do weekly one-on-ones but didn't schedule them. Right? So even if you meet weekly, but you don't schedule them, you tell your people, I'm busy, you're busy, we'll just do it on the fly kind of thing. Directs don't reward you with as much an improvement in results and retention because, as it turns out, you look at the data and you realize what directs care about. First is scheduling, and secondly, frequency. And full disclosure, guys, hopefully you do the math and you go one step further. Managers who schedule and then actually have weekly one-on-ones outperforms any other group every single time, forever. Okay? Now, look, something else, because if you're just learning for the first time, you're thinking, oh my God, I couldn't possibly schedule anything. My calendar is so crazy. I don't think you know how busy I am, Mark.
I'm important.
I'm very important.
I'm double, triple booked.
I'm triple booked. Yeah, because I could be in 3 places at one time, or at least I want people to think I'm at 3 places at one time.
Hey, folks, just so you know, like it sounds silly, but people tell us this, right? These are things people tell us every day.
Yeah. And these are stupid things, just so you know.
They are stupid, and they say
if you're a frontline manager, you're not that busy. Okay, I'll tell you, if the definition of busy in executive circles is if I look at your calendar and there's no empty time for the next 3 to 4 months. Folks, if you want to know whether you're busy, just look at your calendar a month from now. It's almost a desert. Okay, it is. That means you're not busy. It just means you're dealing with urgency all the time. And that's okay, but it's different. Your calendar being full today doesn't mean you're busy. It means you're responding to urgencies. Okay, but anyway, we can go down that path all day long. And we have, but for the record, for those of you who are new, we have plenty of podcasts on managing your calendar. And we don't like to talk about managing time because time doesn't need you to manage it and you won't have much impact on it. On the other hand, managing and scheduling your priorities do matter. And we have lots of guidance there. Don't worry about whether or not you actually have your one-on-ones at the time you schedule them for. Okay. Your directs will totally understand that things change, that meetings get stepped on, that your boss jerks your chain at the last minute. No problem. They don't mind. What directs say is that when a manager schedules one-on-ones with them, 2 things are important. I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to see one more piece of data before I give you those 2 things. We've tested it. Managers who schedule their one-on-ones and then move them frequently get the exact same results and retention improvements as managers who schedule one-on-ones and move them rarely. It just doesn't matter. Okay. The value is in scheduling for 2 reasons. One, directs say, wow, I'm important. You've promoted me in terms of the importance that I have to you. And while most managers go, no, that's not the case. And they say, well, here's how I conclude that I'm more important than I used to be. Previously, I struggled to get time with you because of how busy you were. But now you're putting me on the calendar, your schedule, which previously I didn't rank highly enough to get on. And now I'm on it. So they feel like they got promoted in terms of importance to you. The second thing directs tell us is they can prepare. Look, if you really think about it, guys, even if you do, quote, talk to your directs a lot. I love it when managers are sitting up in the front row and they say, at a conference, they say, some director or VP says, well, Mark, I talk to my people a lot. And all of his directs are sitting behind him and they're all rolling their eyes. No, you don't, you idiot.
It's great.
Okay.
You just got to be there. You got to present and see that reaction.
So
It's precious.
Yeah. And every once in a while I call them out and I say, by the way, you don't know this dude, but everybody behind you just rolled their eyes. And then all the guys behind him are looking at me like, I can't believe you just threw us under the bus. Anyway, if you really think about it, even if you do talk to your directs a lot, you're mostly talking to them about things that are important to you. But MTO3s are valuable because they give our directs time to talk about what's important to them. And that's where trust building comes in. That's what delivers the quality of one-on-ones to directs of manager tools managers.
And it's important all the time, and even more important in a crisis, because they have a lot of things that matter to them right now.
Yeah. When you think about it, you'll admit that this is true. I can talk to my directs almost anytime I want. But we'd bet you don't say that about your boss. Your experience dealing with your boss is probably how your directs feel about dealing with you relative to time and availability. Okay, now, regarding when to schedule, we'll talk about the details of how to schedule in a minute. But for now, don't schedule one-on-ones Monday morning, not Friday afternoon. We want to avoid Monday morning because a one-on-one is a meeting, and meetings slow people down, and we don't want to slow people down the first part of the week. Not Friday afternoon because conflicts that late in the week give you no ability to reschedule. Other than that, our data are not strong in any particular direction. We have some data which suggests that morning is better than afternoons. It's not a hard and fast rule. In fact, almost all my one-on-ones, my personal one-on-ones with my staff, are in the afternoon. It has to do with me being in California and the East Coast already being mostly gone home by the time I'm doing my one-on-ones. Okay. Don't have more than 2 one-on-ones back to back. Okay. Don't schedule a one-on-one and then give yourself a half-hour break and then do another one. We've gotten feedback from the field that ends up not working. Some people prefer all on the same day. That can be fine if you only have 5 or 6 directs. Some people prefer spreading them out over the course of the whole week. There are pluses and minuses to both of those choices. Your mileage may vary. Don't schedule right before one-on-ones right before or right after your staff meeting, or your boss's staff meeting, or your one-on-one with your boss if she's doing one with you. Okay. And don't worry, again, about your crazy schedule. Your unpredictable schedule, if you choose to let that not cause you to not schedule one-on-ones, will just come back to haunt you. And by the way, does anybody else besides Mike and I think that when everyone says their schedule is crazy, nobody's actually is? Okay, so that's scheduling. Let's talk next about weekly. For the vast majority of managers in the world, weekly is the best frequency for one-on-ones. That's what our data show. Managers with equally sized teams who do one-on-ones every other week versus every week underperform managers who do them weekly. If you do bi-weekly, again, fortnightly one-on-ones with a team the same size, all things being equal, which they never are, but here's what our data show. You will have spent 50% as much time in your one-on-ones and have gotten 40% of the value. Now, you might assume that there's some sort of linearity there, that hey, Mark, if I get 40% of the value out of doing them bi-weekly, but it takes me 50% of my time, and if I do them weekly and I get 100% of the value, should I do them twice a week? Which, by the way, stupidly is described with the word bi-weekly again. And the answer is no. We discovered if you go to more frequent than weekly, it actually starts to decay. You get less effective results. And you could have discussions a long period of time about the Jovian calendar and the Gregorian calendar and all kinds of other things, or you could just say the data say weekly seems to make sense. And we believe, though, obviously you'll understand why when I say it, why we don't have data. It's because most of us lead our lives in weekly windows. Most of you listening right now know what your schedule is today and tomorrow, and you have a good idea of what it's like the rest of this week. Next Thursday's calendar, you don't have a clue. You got nothing. You have none, zero, nada. Okay? So if we have a week of our lives roughly in our head all the time, maybe yesterday and today and 4 or 5 days in the future, Telling our directs that we're going to meet with them every other week says this is an administrative thing. It's a corporate thing, a checking the box thing. It's not substantial. It's not built to stay in touch. It's built to touch base. And there's a big difference.
Yeah, I had that experience when I went to fortnightly, as you call it.
Yeah.
One-on-ones at MCI, which is, people told me, like, dude, the things I needed to talk about were last week. like.
Yeah, exactly. And if we have a one-on-one schedule for next Thursday, well, let's say today's Tuesday, and Mike's my boss, and he has a one-on-one schedule with me Thursday of this week. If I have a thought about something I need to talk to him about, I might be able to wait till Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
If our one-on-one is every other week, and this week we're skipping, and so next week it's Thursday, I can't wait. If you've ever had that experience of feeling like you're being pecked to death by your directs, it's partially because you don't give them enough time on a regular basis. If you give them one-on-ones every week, your directs will start delaying those things that aren't truly urgent and talk about it during their one-on-ones. And you will feel like you are interrupted less. You have our guarantee. Oh, you know what? Something else. If you're new, it's only an hour into the show, so probably too late for it to have any real value. But full disclosure, guys, we have a guarantee that I've had for years and years and years and years. If you do one-on-ones the way we recommend them, roll them out the way we recommend them, we guarantee you will spend less time managing than you do now.
Yeah, or your money back for listening to the free podcast.
Yeah. Well, we say that to our paying corporate clients,
yeah, of course we do.
And to public conference attendees, managers all over the world, thousands of them every year. Okay, so now look, if your span of control is greater than about 12 to 15 directs, we would normally tell you that you could start and even keep the periodicity of biweekly. For instance, if you had 20 directs, that would be 10 hours a week injected into your schedule. We know that's a tough sell for us with people we have never met. We get it, okay? Now, I want to be clear, because there have been 50 situations at least where I had senior executives say, we're going to train everybody how to do one-on-ones. They transform my life. And I don't care how many directs they have. And they essentially forced it. We discover that most managers can easily do it. Your belief about your calendar and its extensibility is probably wrong, okay? Your schedule would adjust. And frankly, we would do it ourselves. And in fact, I have done it with as many as 20 directs. But right now, in this time of crisis and fear and distance, we recommend you have weekly one-on-ones with all of your remote staff, even with as many as 20 directs. Yeah, it will be hard, but it's effort expended to address how hard it is to worry about an elderly parent who has respiratory problems to begin with, or is in a nursing home. Managers' jobs are supposed to get harder in times of crisis. I know it's not popular to say, but we're supposed to be working longer hours in this crisis to help our organization and our team members. Now, luckily, because most of us, or many, many, many of us, the grand plurality, are telecommuting, it's not nearly the impact, the longer hours are not nearly going to be the impact on our families than that would have been a month ago. So be willing to work longer hours to have weekly communications with every member of your team, to work on building and or maintaining the trust that you want leads to better results in the face of the fear and distance that this particular crisis is causing. Now, could you go biweekly? Yeah, you could. We wouldn't, not today, no way. We at Manager Tools, we like to say, I'm the one that writes all the management guidance here. We don't teach what I do. I didn't make this stuff up and start doing it and then say, you guys should do it the way I do it. We don't teach what Mark does. Mark does what we teach. And I got to tell you, everything I know, if you told me there's only one thing I could do for the rest of my life, I would say, that's easy. I'm going to teach managers about one-on-ones. If I could wave a magic wand, I would make all managers in the world do one-on-ones. Then I go play golf. because the moment that happened, the amount of management problems we had on a day-to-day basis would fall so precipitously, people would think they died and gone to heaven.
Yeah, they're not doing that though. So stick around.
So
Stick around
exactly. Yes, the struggle continues. The struggle is real. Could you do biweekly one-on-ones? You could. We wouldn't recommend it. You'd get some benefit. Do I think, I don't have any data for this. Do I think that a biweekly one-on-one would counteract sufficiently the degradation of trust and communications that will happen because people are working remotely? No, it won't. That's my professional opinion. And obviously, hopefully it goes without saying, don't you dare do monthly. In fact, if you want to start doing monthly one-on-ones, don't tell anyone you listen to this podcast. I want to get as far away from you as I possibly can and wash my hands for 20 seconds. Okay. Next. So we've got scheduled and we got weekly. How long? 30 minutes. That's all you need. We've tested 20 minutes and we've tested 30 minutes. We've tested 45 minutes. We've tested an hour. We have never had any evidence that longer than 30-minute one-on-ones produce any more value in results and retention, period. And by the way, shorter ones are not well received. They're seen as a check-in again. They're not a relationship builder. Trust scores don't budge when you do short one-on-ones twice a week or even weekly, okay? And actually, the longer you go, the 30 minutes, if you go longer than 30 minutes, they have a much higher rate of cancellation and rescheduling. Now look, you're going to schedule them for 30 minutes. It's very likely that your first few one-on-ones will run long. Our guidance here is resist the urge to lengthen them. Early one-on-ones have that tendency, but gradually they even out as directs get used to the time constraint that you're providing. It's better to have a length over time that causes folks to work hard to get everything in versus a length that ends up creating wasted time at the end of the one-on-one. Okay, so scheduled, weekly, 30 minutes, 2 more non-negotiables, where your directs issues are primary. Okay?
Another one of those things that I failed in my first implementation of O3s.
Yeah. I hear stories all the time. Oh, Mark, I do O3s. I heard you're the O3 guy. I'm like,
well, I told you that when I hired you.
Well, tell him. Go ahead, tell him, because it was good. I can tell you exactly where I was standing when that happened.
Well, for those of you who don't know the history of manager tools, Mark had his own management consulting company. I was at MCI at the time. I think had an IT organization, about 600 people, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I hired Mark to come in and do a balanced scorecard because balanced scorecard was the thing. I thought that's what I didn't
know you were going to go this deep. That's really good.
Well, no, I just funny because I call him something like, dude, I trust you. So spend 2 weeks, do an assessment, come back, tell me about what we're going to do relative to balanced scorecard. That's how much I trusted Mark. You can help, go spend 2 weeks on my money and come back and tell me what we need to do. And he comes back and goes, dude, you don't need balanced scorecards. You need one-on-ones, feedback, coaching, delegation. I said, okay, all right. Yeah. So let's talk about it.
No, that's not what you said. What you said was, okay, but yeah, I'm kind of the client.
We did have that conversation, but that lasted a short period of time because Mark can be very convincing.
Well, no, I wasn't that convincing. I said, okay, that's fine. But if that's what you want, I'm resigning.
That's what I meant by being convincing. so he goes, so we talk about one-on-ones. He says, one-on-ones every week. So I said, dude, I do them. This is how I'm doing one-on-ones every week. He goes, oh, really?
Yeah, good.
Really?
Good.
Do you mind if I sit in on them? Sure. Knock yourself out. So he came back after the one-on-one, dude, sitting with one of your directors and then asking them a series of 100 questions around deliverables and time and budget, etc., is not a one-on-one. Said, but I'm getting everything I need.
That's the phrase I was hoping you'd say. But I'm getting everything I need. It works for me.
It's perfect. I'm always happy.
It's just, and look, guys, if many of you have been listening for a long time. We're not stupid. Okay, we don't profess to be super smart, but we're not stupid. We make reasonable decisions But when it comes to managing, it's amazing the body of knowledge that's out there that people just don't know. If you want to become an engineer in school, they make you do stuff to prove that you can be an engineer. They don't do that in order to become a manager. Neither Mike nor I knew this stuff. We didn't. Mike was actually probably a better manager than I was in the Army. But neither one of us really were trained before the Army to be good managers at all. Really, we weren't. And so we learned a lot of this stuff the hard way. And we just don't want that to happen to you. So if you just ask questions, I think Kathy Stoltz actually referred to it as the grilling.
Yeah. I've heard that.
That's probably not a one-on-one. Okay. So we already know that when we talk to our directs, we talk about what we want to talk about. Most of us don't realize how much our relationship with our directs are colored by them seeing us as their boss rather than the way we see ourselves. And again, if you want an analogy for that, think about how you see your boss. Okay? But look, if we want to build trust, because trust leads to improved trust leads to improved results and retention, we have to talk about things that are important to our directs. And the best way to do that, according to the evidence, is to let them go first in the one-on-one. And by the way, Mike did his grilling after I had already tested one-on-ones where the manager went first, and it was a disaster, and we never let it happen again. There's a name for medical cases, medical tests that are stopped. It's actually, you stop it for safety purposes when the result of a bilateral drug test or something is they have to stop it because fatality rates are too high or whatever. It's a
Stanford
it's a safety
prison experiment.
Yeah, well, yeah. The safety, you cite the safety rule and say we have to stop this test. Well, believe me, the managers going first caused us to have a safety stop. Like, no, we're just literally pouring trust and results and retention all down the drain. So, okay, a simple way to think about a one-on-one agenda for now, and there's more guidance on this, and there's more carefulness and more detail you can get into listening to the mini casts. And if you don't know, we're going to make these show notes available to everyone who gives us their email address so that you all can have it, so you can read it rather than listen to it. And at the back of all of our show notes that are downloaded in a PDF format, we have, in this particular cast, at least 20 to 25 links to other podcasts you may want to listen to. And there's more detail about the agenda and so on. But for now, we want you to think about the agenda as being 15 minutes for your direct and then 15 minutes for you. Now, in the beginning, your directs are going to take more than 15 minutes. Okay? That's normal. That happens almost all the time. Now, look, if you're worried that a bunch of your directs are going to talk too little or not at all, that's not going to be your biggest problem. It's far more likely you're going to have a notable portion of your directs wanting to say too much. I mean, way too much. They just throw up on the desk for 30 minutes. Okay? But again, the only question in professional life when it comes to the quantity of communication is too much, exactly the right amount, or too little. Now, you and I both know that exactly the right amount is almost unattainable based on how different people communicate differently. So therefore, your choice for the rest of your career is too much or too little. You tell me, what would you rather have? Because generally, as a rule, if you'd rather have too much, so would everybody else, if you have to make a choice.
Yeah, and if you say too little, then turn in your manager card.
Yeah, you just let it go.
Fail.
Yeah,
you fail.
Yeah. Now look, if your directs in the beginning seem to be going long, don't be an agenda Nazi and shut them off, okay? Let them take the entire 30 minutes for the first few weeks even. You can always ping them later in that day or the next morning, stop by their desk and go, or on the case of distant remote teams, just ping them and say, hey, give me a call, or I'm going to call you in 2 minutes and cover all the topics you had on your list for that day.
Yeah.
For that one-on-one.
You're the manager. You can walk into your direct's office or cubicle anytime you want. your directs don't feel that same way about you.
Exactly. Well, but actually that barrier goes down a little bit when we're talking about remote workers, right? Because the direct can ping you anytime because they have the same tool that you do. Now, it's easy. It's just as easy for you to say no as it used to be. But I would argue that the more encouraging you are to your directs, hey, text me or call me or whatever. And don't be surprised, by the way, if I video chat you back, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. If some of your directs don't share all that much, don't worry. You'll probably have stuff you want to cover. Ask them a couple of times at the beginning if they have anything. If they don't shame them. Don't tell them they're doing it wrong or whatever, or force them. If they don't, just move on to your topics. When you're done, ask them again nicely. At some point, weeks or maybe a couple of months into the future, they'll warm up or the guard will come down a little bit and they'll realize that it's not flavor of the month. Or if they're still going this way 3 months from now, you need to start thinking seriously about how good a team player this person is. Think about it. What would it take for you to actively refuse communicating with your boss? And there's a rule, Horstman's middleman test. Don't tolerate from your directs that which you wouldn't visit upon your boss. Now, look, there are a lot of other situations that could come up if you're starting one-on-ones, force majeure, on the fly, as it were. Don't start worrying about everything just yet. Just get started. I mentioned a bunch of other podcasts. Virtually every situation we've ever encountered is covered in one of these 50 or so casts. If you think you've got a special case, let us know at customer service at manager-tools.com and we'll help. Now, what are you going to be talking about? It's generally a good idea to have a list. Lots of managers use software to do it. Plenty of us just jot down notes at various times and then we transfer them to our one-on-one notebooks, which we'll talk more about in a minute. I will tell you that in my case, guys, I'm not recommending it, but I'll tell you what I do is I use a program called OmniFocus, which is more of a project management piece of software, but it has tags, these things called tags, and I can have a tag for every one of my directs. And if I think of something I need to tell Wendy, I just go into OmniFocus and in the Wendy tag, put talk to Wendy about X. And the beauty of OmniFocus for me, and it may not be the same for you, is that it's multi-platform. It syncs across my desktop, my laptop, my iPhone, and my iPad. So it's always with me. I still haven't gotten used to verbally dictating stuff. I should do that, but I never do.
I don't either. Yeah, I'd highly recommend it. I use it as well.
Yeah. Now, part of the reason we use OmniFocus, guys, is because if you're new to us, we got turned on to OmniFocus through something called Getting Things Done, GTD by David Allen. If you don't know what we're talking about when we say getting things done, please go to Amazon.com and search the phrase getting things done
and buy
read
it.
read that book
Yes.
because it will transform your professional life relative to personal productivity. Okay. Now look, something else about what to talk about. Each one of your O3s is going to feel differently based on your different directs. Some of your directs are going to be voluble. Some of them are going to be taciturn. That's okay. I'll kid Mike and say they're not going to be fulsome.
No.
Voluble is the word you're looking for, not fulsome. Okay. It's okay if some of your one-on-ones turn into what feel like project status updates from your directs. Okay. If you were my boss, that's what I would give you. I would sit in a one-on-one and you told me, Mark, hey, what do you got? And I would tell you what I wanted you to know. I would say, I did this, I did this, I did this. I messed up on this. I need to give you advance notice. I'm going to miss this deadline. I can't get through to this guy. Could you make a phone call for me? I did this, I did this. I need more budget for this. I'm ahead of schedule on that. I did this. Hey, what do you think about the Dodgers? I mean, that's it. It's going to be very project status-y, very linear, very factual, very logical, because I'm a high D. And that's kind of how I think about work. And that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong because we're not holding hands around a campfire and singing Kumbaya. Okay? One-on-ones are not social relationship building events. They are professional relationship building events, which we know leads to trust and higher results. Okay. Some people, we're going to talk about family. All of that, the whole range of human behavior is normal. And it's okay. It'll work out. And then the last non-negotiable of this thing is to take notes. Managers who take notes in their one-on-ones get measurably better improvements and results from retention than those that don't. Now, it's reasonable for you to be sitting there and thinking, if I've never done one-on-one before, note-taking, that's bad, because managers think, oh, this is a relationship meeting. We're just going to chat. Eye contact is good. Folks, that's not what the data show. And if you're wondering about our data, we're talking about over 675,000 managers worldwide over the last 25 years. Okay? Directs don't need eye contact in one-on-ones based on the data, the results, the retention, and interviews with directs. First off, let's be clear. One-on-ones are a business meeting. They're designed around improving results and retention. What other meeting do you go to where no one takes notes? And rest assured, you're going to end up having discussions about tasks and projects and deadlines and deliverables. Okay? You're going to leave, and your directs are going to leave your one-on-ones with deliverables, things to check up on, follow-ups, communications to draft and to send, changes made to projects, plans that require new work. How are we going to get through a meeting with one another that gives us deliverables without taking notes?
Yeah. And your direct asks you, hey, Mike, I need this from you. And you go like, oh, okay. And then you don't write it down.
Oh, that ain't happening.
Like, okay, that ain't
yeah. Yeah, and they really do like it when you take notes. They know you take notes about stuff you consider important at other meetings you go to.
Yeah, that's the point, right? That the whole point of the one-on-ones is to direct and developing trust. And if things they say, which are important to them, they're talking about the things that are important to them, aren't worthy of you writing down, man, that your actions speak louder than you could ever talk, right?
Yeah, imagine that. And this meeting with them is the one time you don't take notes, right?
Yeah. Okay.
They don't need eye contact. They want respect. But guys, no note-taking on your laptop, okay? And yeah, maybe this has a little bit more clout in Silicon Valley and with less experienced professionals, heaven forbid I say younger. Look, if you went to school and you took notes on your laptop all through school, it doesn't surprise me that you're better at it than me, and that you've developed your own work process, your workflow around it, and it's efficient for you. I get that.
Look, they'll never know though. If you're telecommuting during this crisis, then it'd be impossible for somebody who I'm, talking to on the phone to know
to tell that you're typing.
Yeah, that would never happen.
Dude, we have a weekly ops call every week on Zoom, and we have all of our company employees on Zoom, and people think that A, I can't hear them typing, and B, that I can't see what their face looks like when they turn and start putting their fingers on the keyboard. Even the tension in the muscles of their shoulder are clear. I mean, it's mind-boggling. But look,
like 20 years ago, we were doing. I think we were consulting.
Yeah.
We were right. Yeah. We were doing calls. You're talking, and he goes, and he'd say something, and he'd clack, 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 clack. He says something, clack, 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 clack. He goes, dude, we talked about rules. Are you typing? No.
Yeah. Like, dude, I hear you. Yeah. But look, first of all, forget about it. It's funny, but it's true. Your direct is going to think you're doing email or responding to text or comms or Slacks or whatever.
Yeah, not pay attention to them. They're going to assume it's not you writing down what they said.
Yeah. And even if you aren't doing those things, you're probably like us. And if there's a screen in front of you, your eyes will be going toward it far more frequently than you realize. To say nothing of the fact that why are you allowing the notification setting on your laptop interrupt a meeting? Not right now. Not in a global pandemic. Okay?
Yeah. How about tablets and iPads,
Yeah,
that kind of
so
stuff?
dude, I've told many people one of the sexiest business presentations I ever saw was Mike Swinson, our good friend, who has presented our work for us before, using his many years ago laptop screen that this is 15 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, lifted his laptop screen off of his Windows-based laptop and it became a tablet, and he used Microsoft OneNote. Tip of the hat to the folks at Microsoft who are friends and clients of ours. No offense to all of our friends and clients at Apple. Let's not start a war. But he just disconnected it and or called up OneNote. And it was really cool because he had our one-on-one form on it. And he took notes using his stylus on his laptop, on his now tablet, his laptop screen detached from the keyboard. And then because of the really sexy interface, in my opinion, between Outlook and OneNote, you could circle a person's name and drag that name over to Outlook and onto the calendar, and it would make an appointment. Or you could drag it onto the email icon. It would read your handwriting and create an email to that person. Now, we don't have that level of interactivity in the Apple world, but at some point we will. So our data show that tablets work great if you're taking notes by hand. And just for the record, guys, there's been a study, 3 groups of people in a lecture, one group taking handwritten notes, one group taking laptop notes, and a third group pretending to write with an invisible pen, an invisible piece of paper, but making the motions that they would if they were writing the words of the notes that they were taking. And then later, these groups all took a test and they compared recall rates among the 3 groups. And the laptop group scored worse than the group that didn't write any notes but pretended to write notes.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
Can't make that stuff up.
Yeah. Okay. So those are the non-negotiables. Scheduled, weekly, okay, 30 minutes. Your direct goes first, and you take notes. That's the start. There's a bunch more to learn, okay, but get started now because the crisis is upon us. Your directs are probably already at home. There it is. Okay, so let's get to phase 2. Now that we've defined what a one-on-one is, for those of you who don't know what they are, how do you roll them out today? Now, for those of you who have been listening to us for a while, this is a pretty big change. We typically say, wait a few weeks. But we're saying now, in light of coronavirus, we recommend you roll out your one-on-ones immediately, today, or no later than tomorrow. Okay? In light of the threats to organizations of all sizes and shapes, and for many people's very employment, and the evolving nature of this crisis, and as I've been telling friends who have been willing to listen about the domino effect of there's a health announcement, and then a company does something, and then a government agency does something, and then more companies respond to the government agencies, and some companies respond to the other companies. Things have been accelerating, certainly to include risk to health and life among real human beings. So what we're saying is, when you consider all that and the fear and the distance and our families, don't take 3 weeks to roll out one-on-ones in this special time of crisis. Start today and use this force majeure opportunity that the international pandemic presents to make a difference, to resist the tide of decreased or degraded trust and communication that remote working will do. Or even if your team is not working remotely, but they're in the field with customers and therefore put at risk, and their family is still at home when other families in their neighborhood are working from home. Those are all reasons to increase communication, or if nothing else, continue communication to combat the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, what you've probably heard referred to as FUD before. One-on-ones are a FUD attack vehicle.
Well, there's a marketing thing there.
There we go. Yeah, good. Okay. I stumbled into it backwards because we're not any good at marketing. Literally our entire marketing structure here, guys, is people Google, I'm having trouble managing my team, and they end up at us. And it's free. What do you know? Okay. So normally we recommend announcing you're going to start doing one-on-ones, but not scheduling the first ones for about 3 weeks. That's because if you do it right now, everyone will say they're too busy and their calendars might very well be full. Also, you need time to brief them. And also you need time to answer their questions. And if you're wondering why we say those things, it's because there's a general managerial rule that applies to this specific instance. And that rule is never introduce a change to how you manage people without first taking the time to introduce them to the change you're going to make before you make it. Okay. But look, guys, we don't have time for that right now. Okay. If your team has suddenly gone home to work, you need a tool today to build trust, or at least stop the erosion that distance and fear and FUD. Actually, fear, uncertainty, doubt, distance, FUDD, Elmer Fudd. It's a FUD. It's a FUD fighter. There we go.
Oh, you're on a roll.
I think that made it worse, actually. But it's easy for me to remember. So there are a couple of ways to do this. Either you can do a video call or you can do an email. Okay. We'd recommend you get all of your directs on a short, it only needs to be 10 minutes long video, Zoom, Google Hangouts, Skype, whatever, FaceTime. Okay. Where you explain what you're doing and why. Do it in a group. We'd suggest using these show notes. And again, all you have to do is sign up for a free account on our website. And you don't have to mention us where you got this guidance if you don't want to. Hit the highlights in these show notes about what you're going to do, scheduled weekly, 30 minutes. They go first. You're going to take notes. And tell them why you're doing it. You can talk about trust and communication and results and retention, or you could just talk about the crisis and feeling like you're disconnected from them. Okay. And then also you'll explain to them how it's actually going to work. Okay. Now, look, if you can't do that in a video, and again, it shouldn't be that hard. You'll be able to download these show notes. I think they're 20 pages. Actually, I've got them printed pretty large because I'm old, guys. So I have to have reading glasses as well. So they may only be, I don't know, Mike, how long do you think these things are? 10 pages? Folks, if you don't know, if you're new to us, 10 pages. 10 pages, that's about right. If you don't know, for every single show we've ever done, before we do the show, we write a white paper upon which the show is based.
We meaning Mark or Wendy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And Mike and I, it's not a script. It doesn't say who's going to say what. We just go back and forth. And we try to make it as conversational as possible, although I tend to hog the airtime. I admit that. And you don't ever have to listen to my voice again if you don't want to. You can just download these show notes. And because you'll have downloaded them, feel free to share them with everybody in your team. We want your people to have as low a hurdle to get over as they possibly can regarding doing their portion of one-on-ones. If you can't do a video call, then you can send them an email. And because this is Manager Tools, we're really good at putting words in your mouth. So here's how that email might sound. Again, this email, I'm not making this up as I go. It's in the show notes. When you get the show notes, copy and paste the email, make some simple edits, and send it out. Here's how it'll sound. And I'm not going to try to read it with any tone. I'm just going to read it. In light of all the changes we're going through, I've decided to start having weekly one-on-ones with each of you. There's a lot going on. There's plenty of fear out there, and not being co-located is going to work against our communications in some ways. I think this is a great way for us to maintain good, open communication. We'll be meeting for 30 minutes once a week at a pre-scheduled time. It'll be a private conversation, just you and I. We start tomorrow. The format of the 30 minutes will always be the same. The first 15 minutes are for your stuff. Anything you want to tell me about anything, your work, your family, your pets, your hobby, your challenges, your career are working together. The primary focus of this meeting is going to be you. The second 15 minutes are for me to share whatever I need to with you. We'll probably talk about projects you and I are working on, stuff I need from you, things I've heard from up above, and maybe I'll share about my family too. We'll be doing these on video. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, boss, we talk all the time. And you'd be right. But a lot of those conversations are very short, and they're usually about something very specific. So we don't get to share more info or go into more detail. Our one-on-ones will allow us to do that. Below is a schedule of possible times. I have already blocked all these times on my calendar, so I should be able to keep them. Maybe the next couple of weeks we'll juggle things a little bit to figure out what works best for everyone. I look forward to your replies requesting a time slot. Please reply to all in the next 12 hours before the end of the day today, so others will know that the time you've requested is already taken. I need to hear from each of you by the end of the day. Regards, boss. Okay? Now, guys, so that's the email. Nothing fancy. That's, by the way, that email, or a very close version of it, has been on our website for the last 15 years. And it gets downloaded a lot. Here's how to handle scheduling. Take the number of directs you have on your team and multiply by 1.5. The result is the number of slots you'll offer your team to pick from. Don't panic.
Give me an example. This is advanced math.
Yeah, okay. If you have 10 directs, you'll offer the group 15 slots to pick from. That means even the people that are the last couple out of your 10 to pick will still have multiple slots to pick from.
Do I have to go to all of my directs, the 10 directs, and ask them what works for them? And
no, in
hard.
fact, we don't consider the directs calendars. I know people are going to lose their minds when I say that. They're like, I can't believe you say that. Guys, you haven't been doing this for 30 years. Let me tell you why that's relevant. Because each of your directs calendars are going to be impacted by exactly 1/2 hour. Your calendar is going to be impacted by a half hour times the number of your directs in. Okay? It's the in we're worried about, not the 30 minutes. So you're going to give your directs ample times throughout the week so that even the 10th person, in the case of a 10-person team, will have 6 slots to choose from, which is pretty generous, okay? And these are all times that you've decided work for you, irrespective of whether they work for your directs or not. Now, look, if one of your people comes back to you and says, none of these times will work for me, they're probably full of it, but okay, give them a little flexibility. Give them more flexibility if they're your top performer, and less flexibility if they're your bottom performer. But anyway, you're going to choose those 15 slots, and you're going to put them at the bottom of that email. The way you choose that 15 slots is you consult your calendar. You avoid times right before and right after your own staff meeting. If you don't know how to do a weekly staff meeting, A, you should be doing it, and B, there's a cast for that. Avoid the times right before, right after, and during your boss's staff meeting that you, I assume, go to. You're going to be at home probably during this time, and they're going to be on video. Don't let your directs choose phone when you can have video, if you've provided video for them. So you could probably start them earlier in the day and finish them a little bit later. So you've got a bigger window than you normally would if you don't have a commute. I would even consider doing them in the evening in some cases if it was more convenient for you and your direct. So you're going to put those 15 times in the email, and you're going to let your 10 folks choose. Now, again, you're going to get 5 of those slots back, so it's only going to take you 5 hours. Don't freak about the 15. Now, look, if one of your people says, I don't want to, or are these mandatory? That happens, okay? They may think it's more forceful to say that in reply to all, but that actually makes it easier for you. You could just say, these one-on-ones are mandatory. In light of this crisis and our distancing, they're necessary, period. So folks, that's it about our force majeure pandemic COVID-19 guidance for doing one-on-ones. If my best friend called me right now and he just got made a manager and he knows what I do and so on, but maybe he's not listening to the podcast, and he said, what should I do? I said, send an email now. I'll write it for you and tell people you're going to start doing one-on-ones tomorrow. What if they push back? Dude, don't care. Start doing one-on-ones. The single most important thing I can tell every manager in the world is start doing weekly one-on-ones. It's the most important thing you can do. If you have trust everything else is easier. Without trust, everything else is harder. In the world we're living in right now, fear, uncertainty, doubt, distance, you simply can't go without the biggest weapon you have, which is being trustworthy in your and communicating frequently about things that are important to your directs.
Yeah, well said. Just do this.
Just do this. That's the Manager Tools way.
We got more to talk about, but we're going to publish another podcast tomorrow with some more advice of ours. So until then.